Today I want to answer two of the most common questions that I've been asked at my mental health seminars. The first is, how do I convince my loved one to accept treatment for their depression, anxiety, or mood swings? This is a very common problem and a really common question because it's a huge issue, because it is so frustrating when you know your loved one has a correctable, treatable condition and they refuse to get help. You see, the problem, the frustration is that we can't force a person to accept treatment. In fact, we have the constitutional right to remain sick. So here are three suggestions that you can try to convince your loved one to accept treatment. The first is, give them lots of information about what they're suffering with. We've had quite a lot of success when we give someone who's suffering with depression, for example, information about the illness, depression, the treatment, the symptoms. They're not alone. This is really common. And what we're hoping for is when they read it, they'll say, oh, that's me. I don't have to suffer this way anymore. I'm not alone, and there's a treatment process for me, and then they get motivated to go for help. And so that's why I do mental health seminars, and I have all kinds of resources on my website. I've got books, videos, CDs, lots of information that you can use to present it to someone who's suffering, so hopefully they'll understand and want to go for treatment. Then if that fails, the next step is every time they get into a bad mood, you remind them, how long do you want to feel this way? And when you say that, it shifts the blame. Because usually when their mood gets bad, they're looking for someone to blame for their bad mood. And this way you shift it back to them and say, if you're in a bad mood, it's because you're refusing to accept treatment and you're keeping yourself in that bad mood. And then if those two methods don't help and they fail, then the next step is you have to create painful consequences if they don't accept treatment. And that might attract their attention. But these are very difficult situations. Now, all the while, you need to be praying that God will break the power of the lie that is keeping them away from treatment. In fact, you could even pray that God will send them a messenger that they would actually trust and believe, who would tell them the same thing you're telling them, but tell it to them in a context that they'll accept. Because they're not listening to you, but they might listen to a messenger. So keep praying. This is a very frustrating situation. The next question I get asked so often is, I have a loved one who's in the treatment process, how can I be supportive? Well, the first thing to do is learn as much as you can about their condition, because then you understand what they're going through and what to expect in the treatment process. That way you can be supportive and answer their question. The next is you need to be continuously reassuring them, because the recovery path has its ups and downs, and you need to constantly remind them that they are going to get better. Stick with the treatment, don't give up, and if you have to try many different medications, try them. You see, the dropout rate is very high, so they need continuous reassurance. But I think the most valuable thing that you can do to support your loved one is for both of you to join a support group. I can't emphasize this enough. Support groups are life-changing and life-saving. I have just seen such dramatic improvements in people once they started into a support group, because in a support group you can ask any question you want. And the questions you're asking about your recovery process is likely the same questions that everyone else has asked, and they already have the answers because they're just a little bit further ahead of you in the treatment process. So I find that support groups are reassuring. They give lots of information, and they encourage the person because they meet all the ones who have recovered. And some groups even have a separate group for the family members, and that would be so valuable to you. Another thing you should do is get your loved one off caffeine, because caffeine makes mood disorders worse, and they'll recover faster at lower doses if you get them off all caffeinated drinks. And encourage them to exercise. And that could be really, really low-level exercise. Just take short walks. Even that is proven to be helpful in depression. And then once they have found a medicine that works, encourage them to stay on it. Because so many people, once they're feeling better, they stop their medicine saying, I don't need this anymore, and then they relapse. So encourage them to stick with their medicines once they found the right one. And I've got loads of information on mental health from a Christian perspective on my website, and so there's lots of links below this video, and so there's lots of tools that you can use to help with these two very difficult questions. And if this is your first visit here, you need to get my free self-assessment guide. And to do that, just subscribe to my weekly email newsletter, and you know where the subscription form is. It's always right there. And I'll talk to you again next week, but this week I hope you have some answers for these very hard questions.